now recognize Mr. Latta for his 5 minutes of questions.
Well, thank you much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for holding this hearing, and thanks to our witnesses for being with us tonight. You know, one of the things I think is important to point out is that, you know, in some of the hearings that we've had, we're no longer hearing the words that we're having an overdose issue in this country, but we have a fentanyl poisoning problem in this country. And it wasn't very long ago at a roundtable that we conducted that a law enforcement officer said that those that are lacing narcotics with fentanyl are committing murder. So I think it's important to point out that, you know, we have to see that there's a massive change happening in this country because, again, it's already been pointed out, but I'm going to point it out again, that when you think of the 107,735 people that lost their lives in this country in 2021 alone, that over 70,000 of those were because of fentanyl. So I think it's really important that the legislation, the Halt Fentanyl Act, that my friend, the chairman, and I have introduced is so important to get across the finish line. Because, again, it will permanently schedule fentanyl-related substances as a Schedule I drug and enable researchers to continue to study Schedule I substances for possible medical benefits. And I think it's also important to point out, again, that when the Drug Enforcement Agency's Associate Administrator for Business Operations, John DeLina, was before our committee, he stated that the Halt Fentanyl Act is the agency's top priority. And Mr. Judd, if I could start with you, why would Mr. Delana say that the Halt Fentanyl Act would be the agency's top priority?
Because the amount of deaths that are occurring in the United States, it has to be the top priority if we're going to stem off the number of deaths. Again, 107,000 people died of overdose deaths in 2021 alone. That number went up. I believe it's about the exact same in 2022. We cannot continue to sustain that number of deaths in the United States.
Well, thank you. And, you know, again, some of us were able to visit the McAllen CBP facility before we came here this evening. And let me ask, what trends does CBP have identified in illicit drug shipments, and especially when you think about the international coordination on fentanyl analogs and counterfeit drugs coming in across our borders?
What we have noticed and what has become very, very clear is the cartels want to pull resources out of the field. And the way they do that is they flood specific areas with illegal border crossers. When they do that, it requires us to deploy those resources to that area, and when we deploy those resources, then you have wide gaps that are clearly open. And when you look at 1.2 million gotaways, if every single one of them, and I'm not saying that every single one of them, but if every single one of them was carrying a backpack of 90 pounds of drugs, that's an awful lot of drugs. And that is the scary aspect of this. We must be able to detect and apprehend everything that is crossing the border between the ports of entry. And once we do that, then we can evaluate where resources need to be placed. But until we do that, just throwing resources at an issue is putting the cart before the horse. That's why we have to have the proper policies, programs, and operations. Then we can look at what resources are necessary after that.
You know, something else that was brought up this afternoon when we were visiting, the question as to individuals that in the past might have had some cash on them that are now you're finding folks coming up that have no cash. And so the question then is, you know, what is the cartel out of their goodness of their heart allowing these people to go through their areas to bring them up here for free?
No, every person and everything that crosses the border illegally goes through the cartels. Whether you're paying fees on your way up through Mexico, whether you're paying a fee at the border, every single person or every single thing that crosses the border illegally, it is in the cartel's hands.
Well, and again, I think what you mentioned about the distracting of our Border Patrol by the cartel when they bring large groups of people up into one area is very, very important. And also, you know, one of the things, if I could just finish up with, is that, you know, the cartels are producing fentanyl-laced pills that cost about 10 cents a piece. So that means they're killing Americans for 10 cents. And that's something that, you know, we've got to stop. And I think this is one of the things that's so important for this committee and why we're here tonight. So Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to ask the witnesses, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back and now recognize Mr. Bill.